I mean, honestly, like, I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but I really view this as an extinction level event, and that's both good and bad. And so I think that there are studios being born today that are AI native from day one, and they are absolutely going to eat the lunch of kind of legacy studios who don't make that transition. And that, for me, is going to be the vast majority of studios. I'd be surprised if it's 90, 95% of, especially the bigger studios that are just so slow to adopt anything. If you think of the legacy publishers, like most of them still haven't even succeeded in mobile free to play.
Simon, welcome. So, Goat Gaming seems to be pioneering some bold ideas around agentic AI and Telegram based gaming. And so, for those who might be unfamiliar with what agentic means, I know it's a key buzzword that a lot of people are talking about. Could you explain what Goat Gaming does and then specifically how it's different from other gaming platforms?
Sure. So Go Gaming is an ecosystem of games on Telegram. So we have 8 games today. We're adding new games like super regularly. And Go Gaming itself is a platform where players compete and win prizes. So you can think of something almost like skills, but a lot more casual. So players come in, they pay an entry fee to various different games, and then depending how they place on the leaderboard or whether they win PvP, they can win kind of real world prizes or tokens.
And is this skill based gaming or is this chance based gaming or what is it like specifically?
We focus on skill-based gaming. Yeah, we don't want
Okay,
to operate a casino. So, we
I
have
see.
something like our top performing game. This is funny. So last year we had a team running experiments on UEFN. So we set up an AI pipeline where we could ship a new game a week in Fortnite. Um, and so at one point, I think we shipped like 37 maps, 37 weeks. And one of the games that performed best was this waifu themed game called
Mhm.
Waifu Tycoon. It was one of the top games on UFN last year, and we took that and we made a card battler inspired by that. And so that's currently on Go Gaming. It's called Waifu Clash. Waifu Clash is doing really well. And so players go head to head in these kind of different games that we've created for them and compete to win, basically.
And just so I fully kind of understand your business, it kind of sounds like the way that you're describing it. It sounds like skills on Telegram. Is that essentially what it is?
I mean, yeah, that's one way to look at it. Yeah.
Okay. And then maybe if you could help us understand the agentic piece as far as where does the AI come in?
Yeah. So look, like we have a what I'd call a somewhat crypto native product. So having a token also helps get users in. And gives them various different incentives. The Web3 community is also super into AI agents. So as a team, we've been playing with this tech now for close to a year. And so we started building out an offering that we called the AlphaGoats. And the vision for the AlphaGoats is there would be a collection of, AI agents that players could collect, configure, and then have them battle one another to win prizes. And we create a series of games specifically just designed for AI agents. Um, and then players could have their agents go off and compete, basically, and maybe perform kind of routine tasks for them. One of the other things we're thinking about is how non-owners of the agents can also benefit from it within the ecosystem as well, be it kind of having a stake in their performance and whatever. So we're exploring new gameplay paradigms with that. It's kind of interesting as well because once you let players start to train them, you start getting a lot of like interesting emergent behaviors that you hadn't necessarily considered.
Yeah. So could you kind of step us through like a more concrete example as far as a specific game, and then you're able to kind of collect these agents, and then how they would battle for you? Like what would that specifically look like?
Yeah, I'm going to have to keep it somewhat high level because we haven't
Okay.
divulged everything yet. So these are still in development. I think the V1 is going live probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But essentially, say you collect an agent, your agent has a distinct personality. You can either via prompting or via playing with sliders, tell it what areas you want it to specialize in. Over time, it will learn and it will improve. You can accelerate that learning if you want by microtransactions. And then we'll have a library of games, and they will compete across various different games, and their performance in these games would depend and vary based on the training that you've given them. And so certain types of training will lend themselves to certain games. And then you can either watch them play in real time, or you can see kind of the results later and then kind of tweak their learnings based on that. They'll also you can also have it just auto optimize if that's what you want. And my guess is that most players will actually gravitate towards that. But for those that want to be more manual, then you can kind of learn over time and tweak them. And maybe we can have situations where you can have various AI agents collaborating on shared objectives as well. Like it's just interesting to see where this leads from a gameplay design perspective.
Right. So maybe the way that the audience should be thinking about this, and for anyone in the audience who's a game developer, is that when we talk about AI, we talk about, for example, a lot of impacts when it comes to development. For example, the ability to reduce development costs either through generative types of things or through having AI eventually write code for you, things of that nature. And then on the user experience side, I think the bulk of the focus has been on things like AI NPCs, for example. But I think what you're saying is that another potential gameplay modality or just kind of way in which players could play is by having AI that you kind of control in some way. So you're more like a general to some degree. And, and so to the extent that the technology is coming soon where these kinds of behaviors where you're able to kind of direct actions that could then become potentially emergent because you've got different kinds of AI with different personalities and capabilities, and depending on what they have, they can do different things. And so, and so for our audience, you can kind of remember when, when id first came out with like 3D capabilities, so that you can have like FPS that enabled a whole genre of games. And I guess what to the degree that it's possible, it sounds like what you're saying is, hey, look, there might be a possibility here where you've got the ability to manage, control, upgrade a different kind of like RPG or simulation, army control, whatever experience where you can kind of take it to the next level. And one of the things that we've seen is we've seen idle games where you're kind of controlling behaviors be very popular. So this could potentially be the next step in that evolution. Am I characterizing that in the right way in terms of how you're thinking about it?
I would say so. I think there's also two things to call out. So,
Yeah.
I had one person say, "Well, isn't this just the game playing for you?" I was like, "Bro, like, have you ever played any of the sports management games? They've been doing this for like 25 years. I'm a huge football manager player.
Mhm.
You've never controlled the players in Football Manager, and that's not the game. So, in a way, like this is quote unquote very new, but actually it's also kind of been established for a long time too. The other thing is like I just want to double click on what you said about emergent behaviors. So I was recently, so I have being a gaming CEO, I have friends who are other gaming CEOs, and I was recently playing a friend's game. I won't name the game because it's not out yet. And they have something similar in their game where their characters, the players' characters, essentially AI agents. And I saw a very interesting interaction with these two agents that I would never predicted. Where one agent wanted to establish a romantic relationship with another one, and asked them out, but then was very awkward about it, and then asked another AI agent to come to the date with them. And then we were like, we prompted it, so why don't you just tell your friend to not come on the date? And so he did, and then the other agent was like, well, I didn't want to come anyway. Like, why are you wasting my time? But you get these kind of like weird, quirky outcomes that feel very human, that
Mhm.
no one programmed, right? And always surprise you. And so I think those moments of delight and those kind of experiences can be very compulsive. I've seen you were talking about NPCs, right? But I've been watching people playing Inzoi since it launched. So like when you see a game like that I think the role of both NPCs and AI agents could be very interesting in those kind of genres too.
Yeah, and maybe the other kind of interesting aspect of your business is really around the Telegram side, and maybe we could dive into that a little bit. So operating, I assume entirely within Telegram, you've got a bunch of these games that people will need to buy into, and then they play these skills based games. And so, could you talk to us a little bit more in terms of, well, maybe starting with why did you choose Telegram? What was it specifically about Telegram that attracted you to to build games for that platform, and then with this specific approach around skills-based gaming for Telegram.
Yeah, so starting with Telegram, right? Distribution is destiny. There are close to 1 billion monthly active users on Telegram who are pretty starved for quality content, in all honesty. There's a handful of games there that do very well, but this takes me back to the early days of Facebook. Like I was around in 2007, 2008, 2009 when these games were being built and started to take off. And it was a very similar dynamic where you had this, massive captive audience that was spending a lot of time on there every day, but actually were very limited in terms of entertainment options. And so you had games like Farmville and Zinger Poker and Mafia Wars all taking off. And to us, like it seemed like an obvious parallel, even down to how social and how easy it is to kind of share these games and scale them. And so, just from a distribution perspective, it made the most sense. I mean, going back to something I mentioned earlier, like our product, has a crypto native angle, and anyone that's in crypto is also on Telegram. So if you wanted to target those, whales with kind of larger balances within the space, it was an easier way to reach them, which is kind of contrary to what people think of when they think of Telegram. And then on the skills angle, look, going back to talking about how the audience is crypto native, like we had a game called Mighty Action Heroes, which was our first Web3 game. There was one mode that we added to that where players went head to head. They paid an entry fee, and then the winner would win the prize pot. And the numbers for that mode were just off the charts. We're seeing like day one retention over 80% for anyone that played that mode. And I was like, shit, like the users, Web3 users are financially motivated, and this is like a very clear hook. It has very like strong product market fit. So it was a no-brainer from that perspective, and it's worked out very well. Like we have users that have been playing pretty much every day for a year now.
And can you help describe some of the some of the characteristics of the platform? Like, what do you have in terms of whether it's distribution or Facebook used to have, viral notifications and things of that nature. But when you think about Telegram as a platform, I mean, I use Telegram, but I'm not very familiar with the gaming aspect of it. But are you able to drive players there? Is there a marketing
Yeah.
distribution or other kinds of features that make Telegram good for gaming?
Well, I mean, Telegram is very easy to grow social referrals because everyone has
Okay.
a contact list in Telegram, right? And so if you incentivize the right behaviors, like you can get people to bring their friends in. Also, like Telegram does have native ad networks, just like Facebook does.
Okay.
That will serve ads to kind of if you're a subscriber or a premium user of Telegram, you don't see the ads, but free users do see them. Um, and you can also serve ads outside of Telegram that then direct into Telegram by deep link. So if there's
Right.
specific territories or types of audiences that you want to target for your bot, and you think that they are, with confidence you can find them outside of Telegram, then you can just target them with a deep link.
Right. And then how about monetization? Does Telegram have a native
Yeah.
monetization platform of some kind? Like,
Yeah. So Telegram has a native monetization that goes through the app stores. So, you buy the in-app currency, which is stars, and you can purchase by that.
I see.
Some apps also just use direct crypto payments because everyone outside the US has a Telegram wallet. They have announced they're bringing Telegram wallet to the US this year with the regulatory changes that have taken place over the last few months.
Right. But if you're buying these credits on Telegram, are you also paying the App Store fees?
So if users pay by Telegram stars, that's correct. You pay the App Store fees. If they pay by
Okay.
crypto, then there's no App Store fee to pay.
I see. And what percentage of your audience is paying through App Store versus crypto? Or if you can't say that, then what would you guess would be the general split?
I won't speak specifically about our app, but if you look more broadly, because a lot of this data is on chain, um, my my anecdotal evidence is that typically it's like 4x in favor of crypto. So like 80% crypto, 20%
Right.
Telegram stars.
And you think that's because you could avoid the fees in that case?
I don't know. I don't think it's that. I think it's because users are just have these wallet balances, and are just comfortable just spending more money with crypto. That's all it comes down to. When you see something priced in dollars
Uh-huh.
versus, I don't know, like 100 ton versus $300-400. Like it just feels different. Like people don't think of it the same way. I mean, you've always seen this with the Web3 space, like, people spending thousands of dollars on JPEGs, but, we're not wanting to, I don't know, pay for guac at Chipotle or whatever.
And maybe the other question I could ask is, so you've been developing for Telegram. What about, is it all just good news? Is it a great platform? Or, I mean, typically there's at least some challenges developing on certain platforms as well.
Yeah, I mean, Telegram has its challenges, right? So the audience is incredibly diverse, which actually poses a unique set of challenges. Like we have users who monetize very well from Vietnam to Japan to UK. And then we also have large volumes in developing countries. And like, who are you focusing on? Like, who's the primary audience here? How are you making sure you don't alienate specific segments? Like, I've never had an audience as diverse as the ones we have on our Telegram app. Um, I think scaling an app today is a little bit harder than last year when there was a lot of attention on Telegram gaming more generally. There's a lot of people like farming Notcoin and Hamster Combat. So you have to work a bit harder, but it's still very viable. Um, and also just knowing how to monetize these users. And, one of the things that worked for us is the very first purchase you do in Quick Gaming is very cheap, like
Right.
sub 10 cents. And once you convert people, then like they're already engaged, they're in, and then you can kind of keep them playing.
Oh, cool. Okay. And I think, so I'm an old school guy in terms of gaming. I remember the old Facebook days, and I remember when it seemed like Zuck just all of a sudden decided he didn't like gaming, and then gaming on Facebook Canvas became, completely unviable, and especially with credits. So in terms of like platform risk, what is your philosophy, or how are you thinking about platform risk on Telegram? Like, let's say, I mean, I don't know who that Russian guy is, the famous,
Pavel.
guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Pavel
But
Durov.
if he decided to change his mind one day and say, I don't like games on Telegram, how are you thinking about that risk?
Yeah, I mean, look, platform risk is something we always think about. Just like you, I'm an old guy, so I've been around a long time, and
Yeah.
I've been on the receiving end of platform risk more than once. We were an early Apple Arcade developer. We don't do Apple Arcade games anymore, so I think that tells its own story. But
Right.
um, yeah, look, so this is something we keep in mind. I would say that due to the way that Telegram apps are developed, it's an HTML5 app, so it's very easy to port to browser. We could do that in a couple of weeks if we really wanted to. It's just a question of focus. There are other messaging apps out there. You have Line, you have Kakao. Obviously, there's Tencent in China. So there are options if you want to partner with kind of more regional publishers and take it to other messaging platforms.
Are you thinking about doing that, or are you going to stick to Telegram?
I think for now, it's a question of focus. Like, I'd rather just be the best on Telegram rather than spread ourselves too thinly across multiple platforms with different
Hmm.
needs and different audiences. I think the other part here is that, we are close to the Telegram guys. So Ton Ventures invested in us last year in one of our token rounds. So we have
Okay.
visibility into what's happening in the Ton. Ton is the blockchain that's connected to Telegram, the Ton ecosystem. And we know, and they've been very public, that gaming is the big priority for Telegram and Ton. This is how they see themselves growing and monetizing the ecosystem. And so I'm not particularly concerned about them going cold on gaming. They're not they're not trying to build an ads business, which is what Facebook was doing, right? And
Okay.
therefore, like gaming is kind of more additive to their long term vision.
So I thought we could kind of go back and talk about the AI side. And so when it comes to AI, am wondering, are you most excited by this kind of agentic capability, or are there other things in terms of AI that you're looking at when it comes to your studio?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been very public about this. So I first shared um, like a Twitter thread detailing all the stuff we've been doing in AI in 2023.
Okay.
And so when we started making Mighty Action Heroes, I told my co-founder Ben that I wanted every character to be unique because we wanted them to be tradable NFTs. And he was like, well, that's 25 million 3D models. I was like, well, let's figure that out. And so what we came up with was then called like, uh, procedure generated content, which is, I mean, essentially not that different to Gen AI. And so we've been investing in the space heavily now for over 3 years. We were developing the Fortnite maps at the rate of one a week last year because we wanted to battle test our tech at scale in a live environment. All of the games in Go Gaming are built in 2 or 3 weeks using our internal AI tooling, both on the engineering and the art side.
What do you do in terms of AI on the engineering side? Do you actually have it, develop code, do code audits, or what
Yeah, so we have it develop code, we have it audit code, and we're also working with AI on the automation side. And so automation now is like my big focus. So anything that we can automate, we are automating, be it via, simple web-based tools like Make or GovLoop, or even just what I've started doing more generally. And I'm not a coder, right? Like I have a music degree. I want to just
Okay.
stress that. But I am somewhat technical, technical enough to be dangerous. So I just, use Windsurf, which is a prompt-based IDE,
Yep. Hmm.
and I'm just building apps just to like solve pain points in my work. And everyone on the team is actually. And so I said this in another chat last week, but we at Mighty Bear see being AI native as being, you know, equivalent to being proficient in Office was in 1995, 1996. It's just a prerequisite of being in the workplace. And so we're seeing people at all levels developing really interesting tools. Like our head of marketing right now, I caught up with her this morning. She was building a bot to help her with Twitter outreach and managing her Telegram messages.
Right.
It's just like it's everyone at the studio is using it throughout to make us much more efficient.
So you're saying that you're using AI for engineering, which you've kind of described. We've also tried to use it for engineering, but have had much less luck on developing code that we could use in production relative to like code audits. But maybe I could also ask you, just given your experience using AI in terms of development, using AI potentially for a new kind of player experience with the ability to, manage or deploy a lot of different like AI agents in some way from a game experience perspective. What do you, if you were to look out into the future and as you're using more of the tools and seeing more of the capabilities from AI come online, where do you think we'll be in a year or 2 years from now, as far as like what you think would be the most disruptive or most impactful coming from AI?
I mean, honestly, like I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but I really view this as an extinction level event,
Hmm.
and that's both good and bad. And
Yep.
so I think that there are studios being born today that are AI native from day one, and they are absolutely going to eat the lunch of kind of legacy studios who don't make that transition. And that, for me, is going to be the vast majority of studios. I'd be surprised if it's 90, 95% of, especially the bigger studios that are just so slow to adopt anything.
Hmm.
If you think of the legacy publishers, like most of them still haven't even succeeded in mobile free to play.
Yeah. So when you say extinction level event, what you mean is that there's going to be new studios that basically beat older studios who are complacent or who are not able to change their operational processes to integrate AI more fully. Is that what you mean? Rather than like P Doom being high.
Correct. So like you're going to
Okay.
see studios coming out that can ship content 5, 10x faster
Sure. Yeah.
for
Hmm.
like a fraction of the cost. Like,
Right.
I'm going to pick on someone, but there was a game that came out last year that had been 12 years in development with thousands of people and
Hmm.
hundreds of millions of euros sunk into it,
Yep.
50% Metacritic. Like games like that in this day and age with these tools, like I don't think, I don't think they'll continue to exist, but I think those days are kind of over. And
Right.
so if a studio can create a AAA quality experience, and I hear people say things like, "Oh, gamers are never willing to play anything that's made by AI." Like the average gamer doesn't care and can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
And maybe you can create the same level of content in a year or 2 years with 20 to 50 guys instead of 500. Like,
Right.
what happens to the legacy business then? So I think really going forward, the thing that matters the most is going to be distribution, obviously, and then curation. And that really is like all it's going to boil down to.
In maybe I could ask you more specifically in terms of your studio, since you've been actively engaging with AI. How has it changed, whether it's the operational processes that you guys employ or your team structure, and how do you think that changes the next year or two? And I know that there's a lot of people in AI who think that it's literally the end of this year, kind of like first half of next year, where we're going to see the vast majority of impact from AI, given agentic and given the ability of AI to be able to write code that's at a much better level. But I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on this.
I mean, for me, like it's an ongoing process. Like we are for the past year and a half, we've actually been adjusting our setup and our team and how we operate based on what we're learning and what we're seeing and what the optimal way is. And being very candid, like
Mhm.
not everyone was fully on board with what we were doing or willing to learn the new tools. And
Yeah.
this is again why I say this is an extinction level event for many studios, because if you don't have a team that's open to change, like it doesn't matter what tools you put in front of them. If they're not using them or not making most of them, they can always make the argument that, oh, it's just more efficient if I just don't do it and I just do it the old way. And over time, people just get left further and further behind. And so I've been pretty militant about pushing it, and so is my co-founder. But we've also then had buy-in from the team. Like our art team is super into it. We're very blessed that we have someone on the. I mean, we're based in Singapore, right? So we have many Chinese speakers on the team, but we have someone on the team that's super deep into the Chinese AI forums, and so she's bringing tools to us that like developers in the West don't have access to. Like
Hmm.
every week, she's like, "I saw this on a Chinese AI platform," and then you got this GUI, and it's totally in Chinese, and she's explaining how it works, and she's combining that with our in-house tools, and it's super exciting. But honestly, like for us, it's a process of evolution. We're still figuring out what the optimal setup is. We do have a dedicated AI team and dedicated AI engineers, and we have one person whose job is effectively to evangelize it throughout the org and make sure tools are being used. And you will get some resistance, but once people start using it and become more familiar, they find it hard to live without it as well.
And I thought maybe like the other thing we could talk about is just a little bit more about Goat Gaming in terms of the origin story. I know you have had a career more in traditional game studios. I believe
Yeah,
you worked at like King and Ubisoft, and then you founded a studio called Mighty Bear Games. Is that right?
that's
But
correct. Yeah.
these were more traditional games, and then you kind of shifted to skills based. But could you like walk us back through
Yeah, sure.
how did you decide to start Goat, and then from Goat Gaming in terms of like the current approach as far as skills based on Telegram, and then kind of like what's happening now with AI? Does that change your future strategy at all?
Of course. Yeah, these are very good questions. So, yeah, my last real job was at King. King had a studio in Singapore called Nonstop Games.
Ah,
Um,
that's right.
yeah, with Henrik from Play Ventures.
Henrik, yeah.
So Henrik and I go way, way, way back. It's
Yeah,
like 2009, I think.
nice.
But yeah, I was working with Henrik at Nonstop, and I think it was an unfortunate case of like inverse nominative determinism where Nonstop stopped. And
Okay,
so,
sorry, could you repeat that
yeah,
term again? I that kind of went right by me.
nominative determinism is when a name basically like predicts what someone is going to do.
Ah,
So
okay.
if it was
I see.
non-stop games, it would never stop. So like I don't know, this guy is called A Smith, and he happens to be a blacksmith or something. But yeah, like
Yeah,
names predicting
I
outcomes.
see.
Um, so yeah, anyway, non-stop ceased, and I was, King were very good to us. They offered me the chance to relocate back to Europe and continue working there. But I realized that this was a very unique moment where I had, this basically the best talent that King had in Asia all available at the same time. And so I'd always wanted to start a studio. And so I left and I founded a studio with this great team. We were, I would say, a moderately successful Web2 studio for a number of years. So,
Mhm.
during 2021, we were fending off many acquisition offers. We were profitable. We had two of the top performing games on Apple Arcade, which at that time was paying pretty well.
Okay.
And we had, mobile free-to-play products in early test launch that had very promising numbers. But post IDFA, I could see where the wind was blowing for studios like ours, and it wasn't looking good. Again, like having lived through the financial crisis and seeing platform shifts and seeing how companies can be disrupted by things that happen outside the org. And so we took the decision to go all in on Web3 because I'm pretty crypto native. I've been buying Bitcoin since 2015 anyway. We had people on the team that have been mining Ethereum. So actually, we knew gaming and kind of crypto.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty unusual.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, we went all in on that. Mighty Action Heroes did okay. But the thing we really ran into is just scaling a Web3 game is just really hard because Web2 players are just not interested. And the Web3 audience is quite small. It's very small. And generally actually quite extractive. And so what we did is we realized that we had this one game mode, Mighty Action Heroes, which was a skill gaming game mode essentially, which like massively outperformed like the rest of the product. We realized that that was one thing that we're very good at creating kind of exciting PvP experiences, and we knew that the audience we had was super into the kind of skill gaming element. Um, and then we were like, okay, so we ran into this challenge scaling Mighty Action Heroes on iOS and Android. Like, what is the easiest way that we could reach 1 billion consumers? And it was pretty obvious to me that that would be Telegram. Also, like, we were starting to see the first proof points for Telegram. So some of our investors actually were pretty early to Telegram and were like sharing some of the data they were seeing from the ecosystem. We were seeing Catizen just as it was starting to take off. We were, very early to some of the trends there. And so we decided at the very beginning of last year that we would go kind of all in on Telegram. And rather than focusing 1 year or 2 years building these big games, we would take what we had been doing in UEFN and shipping new games every 2 to 3 weeks on Telegram. And then you find one that works, you can really double down on it. But that was actually a very good outcome for us. Go Gaming launched, I think, July, August of last year, and has now hit, I think, 5.5 million users and has over 100 million on-chain events as well. So no complaints about how that's worked out, but this is really only the beginning.
So is there a strong tie between, because it sounds like there's some relationship between crypto and Telegram to get a game to go viral or to be distributed in a major way? Does there need to be a crypto angle, or is it similar? You said there was like an ad network on Telegram. Are you able to just, like buy a bunch of users, check your metrics, and depending on, you'd be buying against ROAS similar to if you were buying on just a regular game on iOS or Google App Store. Is that how it works?
That's correct. Yeah, so the reason we leaned into crypto angle is that having your own token lets you do a number of things around user acquisition and
Okay.
engagement. Like, it provides you with a powerful lever. But you can totally have a game that doesn't have any crypto integrated at all, doesn't use the native wallet. You
Yeah.
can run ads for any sort of product on Telegram. It has an ad network, and you're just paying. You set your parameters, and you just evaluate how the ROAS evolves over time.
Maybe I could also just ask you about, because I don't know much about crypto. I think I was interested more in the NFT angle in the past, but I never really got around to it. What is, I know crypto seems like it's still big in Asia. Like if you're in Korea or Japan, people are still talking a lot about crypto. It's not, you don't get a lot of people talking about crypto in terms of like traditional Western studios as much as they used to. What is the current state of crypto gaming? Is it, maybe you can just characterize it for me.
I think crypto gaming is going through a tough period because
Okay.
there was a lot of hope placed on these projects that they would, drive mass adoption of crypto across, people that are not in the space today. And so valuations reflected that, and that hasn't happened yet. So there haven't been games that really crossed over to the mainstream, right? I think off the grid is people's great hope because it has a lot of like digital assets that players can trade in its own kind of native token. But no, I mean that hasn't happened yet. So crypto gaming more broadly is in a tough spot. But then there are bright sparks. There are projects like Go. Um, there's a project called Boinkers, so Boinkers on Telegram, which is doing very well. It was an A16Z speedrun product. They're constantly the top grossing apps on Telegram. Um, you've had Catizen, which did phenomenally well. I would say actually the only games that are doing really well in crypto gaming today are all on Telegram because that's where the attention is. That's where you can actually reach normal people that are not also, very deep in the space.
maybe we could actually go through a specific example because I think I read that one of your games got like 5 million users through some kind of viral referral campaigns or things of that nature. Could you just like walk us through like if let's say you were advising someone on launching a game on Telegram, what would that look like? The kind of steps you would take, the kind of things you would do to help promote growth for that game.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's basically just social gaming. So you need to have solid referral mechanics, solid leaderboards, things where players can collaborate on shared objectives. Like anything that worked in Facebook gaming will work here.
Okay.
There's also the element of gifting. So they added something called Telegram Gifts, which is quite interesting. They're going to be fleshing more out on that. It's going to be people essentially giving each other NFTs. But I think within the context of Telegram and a social network, that makes a lot of sense. I'm very interested to see how that shapes out over the next few months. I was looking at this is publicly available, so I was looking at a dashboard that someone built that tracks it, and I think they've done over $35 million in volume in like the last 3 months. So there is like, and this is from an ecosystem that is very underserved. These features are not very well surfaced in Telegram, but there's so many people there that even if the user experience becomes 5-10% better, you can see like massive growth.
And is anyone tracking like for example, for mobile games, you've got Sensor Tower or these other data services, App Magic and these other services that track the kind of revenue and the kind of success of mobile apps and games on iOS App Store and Google Play. But on
Yeah.
Telegram, is there an equivalent thing like
There
that?
are, yeah, there are some sites like TG Stats that basically scrape the Telegram API and try and build a picture of what's going on. They have very mixed reliability, so I wouldn't say the tools today are as good as anything like Sensor Tower. Or, um, I was going to say App Annie, but it doesn't exist anymore. It's Sensor Tower,
Yeah, App Annie
right?
became Data.ai, which merged with
Sensor
Sensor
Tower,
Tower.
yeah.
So yeah, now
Sensor
Sensor
Tower.
Tower.
Oh, what's there's the other one that's much cheaper. I can't remember, but yeah,
App
they're
Magic?
not as good. Yeah, Magic. Sorry, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing that's really equivalent to those yet. But look, the gaming ecosystem of Telegram is barely a year old.
Mm,
Like, there's a lot of like you should think of this as mobile circa like 2010 or
right.
sorry 2011 maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and so maybe I'd probably now just want to ask you a little bit more about. So you've been in business now. You started your company, and you also started. You mentioned you were in Singapore. I'd love to hear
Yeah.
a little bit more about like the operational side of your business. Why did you choose Singapore? What was it like initially getting your company off the ground? Like, who are your co-founders? That kind of thing. If
Yeah, sure.
I think other startup founders would be interested in kind of like that initial startup journey.
Yeah. So look, a lot of people are going through this now, but when Nonstop closed, I had a choice of whether to stay with the company and relocate or stay where I was. And I would love to say that we chose Singapore because of some great insight or we had some thesis or something like that. That's not strictly true. Like it's just that everyone was available in the same time at the same place. And this is, going back to 2016, 2017, like remote working was just nowhere near as common. Like the consensus was that it just doesn't work. I'd say that's actually still holds true for some people. Some people not a very good fit for it. But yeah, like the prevailing logic was that everyone needed to be in the same place. Um, and so we were all in Singapore, which is why we picked it. And then around that, we developed the thesis, which was like, look, we have a lot of exposure to what's happening in Asia. We think that we can take some of these emerging Asian trends and repackage them for more mainstream Western consumers. And so that was always actually my best thesis from day one. And I would argue, even with what we're doing with Telegram today, that hasn't really changed. Like we take a lot of very complex experiences, we try and repackage them in a very simple way, and then try and take what we're seeing in this part of the world. India had Mobile Premier League, which was also like a big leader in skill gaming, and actually
Yep.
has much bigger influence on us than skills. So we're
Mm.
looking at what's happening in India and Asia more broadly, and then reapplying it. I was working at King with some very talented people. We were talking about Henrik earlier. So he advised me early on. He was like, "Look, you need to get a strong technical co-founder, yourself as a product person, and then maybe like a back end guy and someone else. And so like we ended up with four founders initially. Um, of the eight people we had on the first day of the company's operation, four are still with us today. So
Okay.
like 9 years on, like we're still 50% of the original eight is still here. Um, but over time, the four founders, there's two of us left now. I think that's quite normal over 9 years. Like one just wasn't really a good fit for what we're doing, and we discovered that pretty early on. And the other one left after 8 years. And so again, that's kind of okay. I think one of the
Yeah.
things I think one of the things you internalize is that people have like a tour of duty quite often. And for some people that'll be a year, and other people will stay much longer, and some people will stay till the end. And like that's all right. And yeah, so we set the studio up. We were supposed to get funding right out the gate, but there were various. I mean, I won't be too specific, but there were various things that happened outside of our control around non-competes that made our early funding that we'd been verbally promised not materialize, which kind of left me in a tricky situation because I had to fund eight people's salaries basically out of my savings along with the other co-founders. But we did manage to get the company off the ground. But then in 2017, no one wanted to fund a gaming studio in Asia. They were like, "What are you doing? Why are you not in America? Why don't you just move back to Europe? I've got two European passports. I could live anywhere in Europe, but like, why don't you just go back there?" And so we were within 2 weeks of running out of cash. We had over 150 rejections. And actually, our very first lead investor was Rocket Internet, which is not someone you would think of as like someone that backs gaming companies. For those who don't know, Rocket Internet is quite notorious in the US because they basically clone US businesses and then rush them to market, then try
Mm.
and flip them. They're the guys that tried to basically, clone Airbnb in Europe and then sell it back to them and pour loads of money at them and whatever. Like, it's a very famous incident in Airbnb's history. Anyway, they're no longer on our cap table, but they were our very first investor, and they backed us. And we had to really scrape and fly around the world and do whatever it takes to bring in people that were willing to take a bet on the studio in Singapore because it was so unsexy then. Now everyone is like, "This is amazing. You're in Singapore. It's so future forward. It's so easy to do business there. It's got a great tax rate. There's loads of talent, and you get access to all of Asia and the West." Like, yeah, this makes a ton of sense. But back then, like, people didn't appreciate that. And so I guess what I would say to anyone is that if you stick it out hard enough and you're willing to suffer and you're willing to keep getting punched in the face with rejections, like you will eventually like get things up and running and get the support you need. But you do
Yeah.
have to be willing to just endure constant rejection, like 150 rejections for the first round. Last time we
Wow.
raised
Yeah,
money, it
that's
took us like 6 weeks. But yeah, go.
yeah, it sounds like you have an actual real entrepreneur story because I think that during the age of excess, right? We had a lot of people in like the 2020s and till about the last few years ago where it was just so easy to raise money that we didn't have like real entrepreneurs that had to go through so many rejections and really had to like fight for funding and things like that. So we're probably getting closer back to that kind of situation, and it's good to hear that you actually weathered that storm and actually made it through to the other side. So maybe the two other questions I would have is really around your again more around your startup journey, but over these last 9 years. First question is like, what was the biggest challenge that you faced?
The biggest challenges are always people challenges. Like building a product is easy.
Hmm.
Like you and I have both been in this space for many years. You know exactly
Yep.
what it takes. Occasionally, like you'll get a hiccup along the road, but like it's actually pretty straightforward. Um, I think there were many things that I didn't appreciate about running an org early on. So I'll give you an obvious example. I used to say to people, "Hey, look, I'm just going to keep piling work on you, and you need to tell me like when you're at your limit, and so then I can dial it back. And I just need you to tell me like what is okay." Like 99% of people are actually really bad at that. And so like, we pushed a lot of people too hard early on because they weren't capable of putting their hand up. And by the time they put their hand up, like, it was just too late. Like either they'd been failing at their job and lost the confidence of the team around them, or, they were angry at us. And so I think other things are like we didn't fully appreciate cultural differences. And so, like, again, someone who is more European or Western is just more likely to vocalize when they don't agree with something or not happy with something. Whereas people in Asia are more likely to go along with it, like maybe when you're speaking to them face to face, but later on you find out that's not the case. And so being able to maybe adjust your messaging and how you operate so that people that wouldn't normally speak up actually do, or you can kind of extract from them what it is that they're really feeling. Yeah, I mean, we've made a lot of mistakes on personnel down the years, both in how we manage and how we hire, and that's consistently been the hardest thing. I think we do a pretty good job now, but um, it's never perfect. You're always learning.
Right. And the second question I was going to ask are the biggest lessons you've learned, but would you say that those align with some of the challenges that you mentioned?
Yeah, look, and it's probably oversharing a bit, but one of the things I realized over the years that there were some people that were just not working out that I just persisted with because I wanted them to succeed at all costs. I was so personally invested in their success.
Hmm.
And the minute I start losing sleep over someone's performance or how I'm going to communicate certain things to them or like why I'm annoyed with them or whatever, like it's generally a pretty good sign that like things are not going to work out. And there's never once been a case where we let someone go where I didn't wish hadn't done it sooner.
Okay. All right. So final question for me. I'll make it two parts, but I'd love to hear your future outlook. One, in terms of AI and AI's impact on gaming. And secondly, the outlook in terms of GOAT gaming, where you'd like to take the company, things of that nature. But first, I'd love to hear more about specifically to AI.
Yeah, look, I'm not gonna make any bold predictions because I don't think anyone has any clue how this is going to shake out.
Right.
What I believe is that the workplace is going to look fundamentally different in the next, even at least for us within the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be unrecognizable how we work to how we worked for the previous, 40 years since computers started appearing in offices in the 80s.
Hmm.
Even down to the fact that I don't even type a lot of the time now. I dictate to an AI. Like that's 60, 70% of my working hours are like speaking to an AI. Um, so I think the cost of content creation and coding are going to go down, by orders of magnitude. And that probably will mean many smaller, more experimental experiences, which can then be developed because, if you're creating something incredibly niche, like it's maybe not worth financial risk today, but if you could put that product out in 2 weeks, then why not try it? And so you're going to see, I think, a lot more creativity, but then a lot more noise, right? So the challenge will be distribution.
Right. All right. And then more specifically about your company future outlook in terms of where you're going to try to take the company in any kind of specific strategic direction you'll be going, that kind of thing.
Yeah, look, we're all in on messenger gaming. We think it's the best way to reach millions or hundreds of millions of consumers. And so we're going to be building a lot more in that direction. And so I want us to become the dominant messenger gaming company globally within the next 5 years. That's the goal.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks so much, Simon. I think that's basically all the questions that I have. Is there anything that I missed? Is there anything that you think that I should have asked you that you think it'd be helpful for the audience to know?
No, I think that was pretty comprehensive. Yeah,
Great.
thank you.
All right. Well, in that case, thank you so much for your time and insight, Simon. And for our audience, we will catch you next time. Thanks, Simon.